Welcome to Intermediate Python. We'll get right started. So welcome. I am Xinyang, a freshman at Bergen County Academies. Python was actually my first programming language. I have 4 years plus of experience. Also, I use it a lot in competition, so has a lot of memories attached to it. So you from the forums, the sign up Google form, I see that you all have like varied experiences with Python. Like, um, if you don't have like much experience, it's completely fine because in this class, lesson one, I'll be going over some basic Python knowledge. So, yeah, I will try to keep things consistent and at the appropriate pace in alignment with everyone. So if the class is like too easy or too difficult, you can feel free to privately message me and I will take note of it for next class. So each class is 1 hour long and usually contains lessons and practice problems, with the exception of this first class. And also I have a teaching assistant in this meeting right now. His name is Leo Lee. So if you have any questions, you can redirect them to him, or if you have like any technical difficulties, you can tell him and he will take note of that. At any point, if you like need to leave early or will be missing a lesson next week or later, you can always email me at personxe@gmail.com. All right. So after each class, I will send the slides as a PDF to everyone, so you can like review the material if you want. All right. So today is just to see where everyone is at. I will get into more advanced topics as time progresses, but the objective for today is just to install Python idle, review some basic Python knowledge, and yeah, teach you guys some essential skills. All right, first off, um, installing Python. So you may see the term IDLE. So what is idle? IDLE stands for Integrated Development Learning Environment. It just means where you can edit your code at. It's also so Python has its own idle packaged with any download of any version of Python. So what it does is it provides tools for editing, running, and debugging code. It's pretty efficient for code development. So uh, to install idle, everyone just please go to www.python.org. Nice. So what you want to do is go to this downloads page right here. So downloads, you can see a lot of releases for Python, and latest version is 3.11.3. So you want to click, if you don't have Python already, you want to click this button right here. Also, like depending on your operating systems, like whether or use Windows or Mac, you will see different pages. But generally, there will be a gray button here, and what you want to do is click it, and it will install a file onto your computer. So please download uh, the latest version of Python, and make sure it's Python 3, not Python 2. Python 2 is like entirely different. All right, so looks like everyone is done. So next, click Open File if you can see it, but otherwise you just locate the file. Should be in your downloads page. So once you click open file, you will see this. Something similar to this, at least, because since I already have Python installed, I will see a different page. But if you don't have Python, you should see a menu called install Python. So click that, click install Python, and it will take around 5 minutes to install all the packages. Windows computer, you can just search up by pressing this Windows key right here. You can search up IDLE, and you will be able to see all the different versions of Python you installed. If you're on Mac, you should be able to locate an application called Python IDLE 3.11. This step might be a bit confusing, but should be manageable. So if you're done with the step, you can like type in chat. If you have any questions, you can like also type it. All right, so looks like everyone's done with that. So once you have Python IDLE downloaded, so I think everyone already done that. So we're gonna review some basic Python knowledge first to prepare for the later classes. So in Python, a really helpful tip to know is that objects will most likely be in different colors depending on what category they belong in. So let's say a variable is going to be in a different color than a function. A string is going to be a different color than a built-in function. So Python makes it pretty easy to differentiate between different types of objects. So over here we have a chart for IDLE color coding. As you can see, the default color for text is black, and it's pretty much used for all data and variables. For example, 23.6 and area, they're not like anything special. They're just like plain text, so they're in black. And then we have green for strings. I will get into that in a moment. So for example, hello world is a string, so it will be in green. Then we have purple for functions, orange for commands, blue for user functions, dark red for comments, and light red for error messages. This chart will be pretty useful later on. So as I mentioned, everyone is at like different levels of using Python. So we will start this course by reviewing the basics. So what are variables? Variables, they store data values. So you can assign values to variables. These values can be like text or numbers, etc. And you can name these variables. However, the naming of variables has some restrictions. So it cannot conflict with any built-in naming of Python. So how do you tell that? Basically, you look at the color of the text. If it's in a different color other than black, then you should use a different name. So as mentioned, variables take up two main types of values, and integers. As you may know, integers are whole numbers, but what are so strings in Python are defined by putting quotes on both ends of text. So essentially what they are is that strings are any body of text, such as words. But it's not limited to just words. As long as you put text inside a beginning quote and the end quote, they count as strings, unless you put another quote inside the string. And strings usually appear as green. So over here, we have hello. You see the start quote and the end quote right here. Since it is surrounded by these quotes, it is considered a string. And you can assign the string to a variable, and that variable will store the data value for the string. All right, so over here, we have a new Python file. So usually if you open IDLE, it will lead you to a different like menu. So what you want to do is press Control N to create a new file, and please name that file class1.py. .py is the default ending for a Python file. All right, so how do you assign a value to a variable? So the format for creating variables, you have name equals, and then I'm just gonna, and then over here you can like, this is this, and then you can basically put in any string or integer you want, and once you put it in, it's like you call it assigning a value to a variable. For example, we have hello world. We have name equals hello world. That is a variable, and hello world is a string. But you can also have name2 equals, you can also assign it to a number. So I can do name2 equals, let's say 21. It's an integer, and it will also work. Now, you do not want to name multiple variables the same name, because that way Python will get confused and your code will not execute properly. Oh, by the way, name is just a generic name for a variable. You don't have to name a name, just name it anything you want. A good one thing about strings is that you don't necessarily, about numbers, is that you don't necessarily have to put numbers and normal words. There's like really no distinction between them. You can put numbers in strings and it will work just as fine. For example, we'll have, just name this variable variable, and you can put numbers in strings as well. However, unlike how you can put integers in strings, you cannot put what you would normally put in strings by its own. So you can't, they're not like interchangeable. So normally you put a number, see, without the quotes. You don't need the quotes to assign an integer. But with, let's say, words, you must assign words to a variable with quotes. If you do something like this, then it will be a syntax error. because with regular text, with non-integer text, you need the quotes. Are there any questions? All right, we'll be moving on. So yeah, as I demonstrated, you can assign a variable to a string or integer. So now let's move on to the famous print function. The print function is like one of the most basic functions that you get introduced to in Python. It's very essential for displaying objects. So remember how we had the variables earlier? So you can make Python display these variables using the print function. So notice how there are two parentheses behind print. So you can put the names of variables in there, or you can just put strings, integers, and more. So this is the print function. Wait, yeah, I should keep this. All right, let's say you want to make Python display hello world. How do you do that? Use the print function. You can do it two ways. You can just put the string itself in there. Or since we have a variable defined, so we assigned hello world to the variable called name. So we can also put the variable inside the print function. Now you can see there are two hello worlds printed out. This is because we have print hello world, which prints hello world, and we also have print name, but since name has hello world assigned to it, it will also print hello world. So that's why we have two hello worlds. So now let's move on to operators. So as you might have realized, you can do math in Python. And to do that, you need operators. Operators are symbols that you can do calculations with. They're basically like regular math symbols. And over here, we have this large chart of all the operators in Python. Of course, you don't need to like know all of them like right this instant, but I'll be going over some of these. As you can notice, a lot of these operators are like your everyday math symbols. We have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and so on. But there are some instances where you have to use a different symbol to do an operation in Python, notably being the multiplication symbol. It is an asterisk, like it's the star symbol instead of your usual dot or X. And with division, instead of the divide symbol, we have the fraction symbol. So here we have 3 plus 1, and it will print out 4. And Python also does PEMDAS, if you know that. You probably are familiar with that. So say we have this number plus this number times this number. Of course, it will take you it probably will take you like 10 minutes to do this. But with Python, you get a result almost immediately. So this is one of the main ways that how Python is extremely useful. But you can also do operations with variables. So remember how we have a variable with a number assigned to it? So let's create another variable and assign it the value of 31. You can do operations with variables. So you can do name2 plus name3. It's essentially the same as doing 21 plus 31, since they are the values that are assigned to the variables. I know, it's very surprising. Oh, by the way, this is not a proper Python like notation. Then to do this operation, we can use a print function, and if we run this, you can see it will print out 52. Yeah, so this is how you do operations with variables. So that was some basic Python knowledge that is very essential throughout this course. But I will introduce more topics as we move on. Once again, this is the first class, so I'll be like getting to know where everyone is at. So what is language documentation? So let's say you don't know how a certain function works, or how to define a variable. So what will you do? You use documentation. So documentation is basically a glossary of all the terms, attributes, and objects. You can like think of it as a cheat sheet. So most computer science competitions also allow language documentation to be used during the competition. And Python allows you to access documentation within IDLE, which is very convenient. But otherwise, you can also find documentation for Python 3 using this link right here. Okay, so as you can see, there are a lot of things in here. And so let's say you want to search up how to use a function, how to use a certain function. And so you have this quick search bar right here. And say you wanted to use documentation to learn about something. Let's say I don't know what the print function is. So I would search a print here and click go. You can see all the objects related to print within Python displayed in one gigantic screen. There are a lot of things, but the most relevant results will be right at the top. As you can see here, we have print Python function. If we click here, we have all the information you need to know about print. Often it will give you a lot more information than you needed, which doesn't really cause you any harm, but at times it may get a little confusing. But using documentation is very, very essential if you like get stuck on something, if you don't know where to go to do something. So as you can see here, all this documentation might seem a bit too confusing. So, but that's fine, because conveniently enough, Python allows you to access documentation within IDLE. So you can use two functions to access documentations. So we have two functions right here, dir and help. So they're extremely useful built-in functions that allows you to find any pretty much the keywords, functions, and modules you need. And other than this, they don't actually serve any other purpose, and you won't really see these inside any finalized code because they're really just here to help. So the dir function stands for directory and it returns info about objects and attributes. Using dir without parameters gives you a list of magic methods. So magic methods, they're basically functions and objects that start and end with these underscores. So most of the time, they will look something like this. It will look something like this, and they're extremely useful. All right, so how do we use the dir function? So to use the dir function, you have to use the print function to go along with it. So you put print and then dir like this. And what it will do is it will give you a whole list of all the relevant results. So it's basically like documentation in a more organized sense. We have annotations, built-ins, doc files, all that cool stuff. All right, but once you have all the results from using the dir function, you can use the help function to go along with it. So the help function is basically an extension to dir. It specifies the parameters of an object or attribute, and it's like a squeezed Python documentation inside a single function. As you can see here, we have squeezed text, 9,266 lines of squeezed text. And going back to this, as you can see, we use the dir function to get these results. So let's say I want to learn more about built-ins. So what I would do is I would use a help function and then put built-ins inside the parentheses. If I click enter, it will give me all these squeeze text that you may or may not want to open. Yep. You can also use help on more specific topics. Let's say you want to learn more about the print function. So you would put the print function itself inside the help function. And if you run that, you will see something like this. When I ran the help function with the print function, it returns all the information you need to know about the function. All right, so we will be moving on to some more helpful tips that will help you along your programming journey. We also have the print function. I know you already saw this function before. I introduced it before, but this function is actually extremely helpful in code debugging as well. So let's say you have this very long line of code and there's an error within it. You have a bunch of variables and you don't know which one of these variables contains the error. So you will use the print function on each one of these variables and you will see which one of these contains the wrong value. And it's very helpful in code debugging because it can allow you to physically see where an error is. You wouldn't know otherwise if you don't use a print function. because it will just all the values will be just stored in your computer and you won't be able to see it yourself. Then we have Python comments, also very essential. So using the hashtag symbol will allow the following text to become a comment. So comments are comments. They don't run in the code itself, even if the comments contain code that would otherwise be run. And you basically use comments to let's say describe what a certain line code does, or you can like take note of any, let's say, things that you need to fix as comments. Over here, as you can see, uh, I use the hashtag symbol in front of print enter. So this code no longer runs because I put the hashtag in front of it. It is now a comment. Let's say we have a print function, print hello world. It will not run because it is a comment. Let's say you want to make a longer comment. Let's say you want to write an entire paragraph on what your function does. So of course you can just do this and etc. But that will take a lot of time. So you can use 3 quotation marks. And what this does, it makes everything in between these quotes comments. These will not run either. And you can fit as much text as you want in these quotes. The reason you use these 3 quotes is because, say you have a comment here, and once you skip a line, it is no longer a comment unless you put another hashtag in front of it. So for longer comments, you just use this. And make sure when you're using the 3 quotes to define a comment, you want to always end with these 3 quotes, or else it will count as a syntax error. And that is pretty much it for lesson 1. So today we just went over some basic Python knowledge, and we went over some basic code debugging and comments using IDLE. So if you guys have any questions, you can like privately message them to me, and otherwise you can like mess around with IDLE for like 5 minutes, and then you guys can leave. Thank you for coming.